We'll pick up in chapter 1, verse 1. Moab rebelled against Israel after the death of Ahab. Now, that's all we'll take on for just a moment. And let me set up the book of Kings for just a second here, where we got to consider this first of all. In the Hebrew Bible, there is no separation from 1st and 2nd Kings at all. That is something that's in the English Bible that you and I have. But as far as the Hebrew Bible, there is no such separation at all. But another thing to know, and just remind ourselves that when we were studying through 1 Kings, what we know as 1 Kings, we saw the line of the kings of Israel from not only just Israel itself, but as it divides into two nations, essentially under one roof. It's really a tragic division that happens. The north and the south, the 10 tribes of the north, known as Israel, and then the southern 2 tribes in Judah. Now, not only did we follow the lines of the kings of Israel, but we also saw prophets, some of them named, some of them not. But just know this, it's interesting that politically, as the nation of Israel moved forward and through their timeline, not only did God have kings that had a line of succession, but he also had a line of prophets. And that will be very clear tonight as we see a transition from one prophet to another. Just like the line of kings are succeeding, so is the line of prophet in a way. So we'll follow that here in this chapter in the next this study tonight. But Moab rebels against Israel after the death of Ahab. All I want to say is this: old nations always try new leadership. When new leadership comes into town, it doesn't matter what the circumstance is, the nation, the country, whatever. Always old nations try new leadership. And we've seen it in American politics, of course. Whenever there's a new leader in town, boom, amazing how quickly things can either turn around for the good or the bad, right? Probably one of the most famous is the Iranian hostages when Ronald Reagan became president. Some of you remember that, right? It was like this long, ongoing thing that couldn't be resolved, and it was like, 24 hours after Reagan was president? It's done and over with, right? That's new leadership, and then they're like, we're not messing with this guy. That's just the way it works. But Moab rebelled against Israel after the death of Ahab. They're looking for weakness. They're trying to figure out what kind of leadership they're dealing with. And the fact of the matter is this: the leadership is only getting worse and weaker as far as that goes. So Moab does well to test them, because instead of just being subjugated to them, they are now going to actually push back. And unfortunately, Israel is not as strong as they used to be. So it says in verse 2, "Now Ahaziah fell through the lattice of his upper room in Samaria and was injured. And so he sent messengers and said to them, 'Go inquire at Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, whether I should recover from this injury.' But the angel of the Lord said to Elijah the Tishbite," in verse 3, "Arise, go up to meet the messengers of the king of Samaria, and say to them, is it because there's no God in Israel that you're going to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron? Now therefore," in verse 4, "thus says the Lord, you shall not come down from your bed to which you have gone up, but you shall surely die." So Elijah departed. And in verse 5, when the messengers returned to him, he said to them, "Why have you come back?" And so they said to him, verse 6, "A man came up to meet us and said to us, 'Go return to the king who sent you and say to him, thus says the Lord, is it because there's no God in Israel that you are seeking to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore you shall not come down from your bed to which you've gone up, but you shall surely die.'" And so in verse 7 he said, "What kind of man was it that came to meet you and told you these words?" And they answered him, "He was a hairy man with a leather belt around his waist." And he said, "It's Elijah the Tishbite." He knew. All he needed is an identifying factor. And he was a really hairy guy, and he had a weird thing he did with his belt. He's like, "It's Elijah, I knew it." Now, Ahaziah has what happens to everyone, whether you're a king or a pauper. He has a tragic accident. And I have learned something and been humbled by this, just from not myself so much, but other people I've seen in life, that no one is off limits. For young men, I'm speaking for myself and my friends that I know, we feel like we're invincible when we're young. We do crazy things thinking, we'll never get hurt. Not us. Some other idiot might get hurt, not me, right? And that's why when we say, send it, bud, we're like, we're never going to get hurt. Yeah. Well, here's the thing, that whether you're a king or a pauper, a stupid tragedy can happen to anybody. It just so happens that this is a really lousy, wicked king, and it's almost one of those things where we can justify, like, oh, he's a bonehead, he deserves it. But it hurts when it happens to someone that you love and you care about, and you think, why them? Should never happen to them. They're good people. And we could talk about that logically and theologically another time. But the point is that Ahaziah had a really silly accident where he fell through the lattice and he got injured. And it's one of those injuries where he's like, am I going to recover from this? And what he does, as we just read it, he wants to go to Ekron to Beelzebub, the prince of these pagan gods. Now here's the thing I have written down here in my Bible. If you want to know what you worship, all you need to do is look no further than where you run when things are really hard, when times are troublesome. And I don't mean that to be any negative thing necessarily. It just, if you really want to know, it's like doing accounting work. You can think that, hey, we're doing really good. Or isn't it amazing how we account for our diets? I am eating really healthy today. It's like, really? Yeah, I've been really moderately, really healthy. And then you're like, well, let's see what you've eaten. If you got a receipt of those things, you're like, whoa, you ate 3 pizzas, 3 milkshakes. This isn't healthy. Oh, that was all after my healthy meal. You know, it's weird how we account for things, right? It's very simple. If you do an accountant work on your spiritual life, where you run to in times of trouble is what you actually depend on. Facebook, drugs, alcohol, sex, relationships. I mean, we could go on and on and on, you understand. But when times are really tough, where you run, where you find peace and comfort and solace, that is what you depend upon truly. That's what you think is really powerful. That's what you and I think will actually deliver and help us. Case in point, the king of Israel, his name, Ahaziah, means the Lord will sustain. Inferred, the Lord will sustain me. The man whose name means the Lord will sustain me gets in an injury and says, hey, we should go to the God of Ekron to see what's going to happen here. It's like mind-blowing to even think of the implication here. But that's because he's a pagan. He's the king of Israel, but he's a pagan, man. That's the reality. Now, I do think, and it really goes back to the question asked multiple times from the prophet or the messengers here. It says, is there no God in Israel? For example, like in verse 6, is there no God in Israel that you couldn't seek to inquire of him instead of Beelzebub? That's like saying to somebody, have you prayed about that? It's almost so obvious, but so necessary, isn't it? There once was an assistant pastor, Ellie Romaine, and he counseled so many people, so much, that he had a plaque behind his desk that says, have you prayed about it? So people would, and I remember thousands of people, he had to deal with a lot of people, so he didn't have a lot of time to waste. And so people would come into his office, and he wouldn't even sometimes look up from his desk. He would be doing his work, and then the door would open, and he would just point behind his head like this. And the plaque said, have you prayed about it? And he'd wait for the answer. And they'd say, well, no. And then he would just go like this and point out the door. Point at the thing. Have you prayed about it? Then go out the door. That's Ellie Romaine for you. That was Pastor Chuck Smith's assistant for years. But it's one of those things, it's so obvious, isn't it? It's like, well, what have you done since the tragedy, since the accident, since the problem? Have you prayed about it? Is there no God in Israel that you couldn't seek him? Well, it's just so obvious, it's painful. But, I think there's probably something underlying here that would really be helpful for us to identify tonight. And it's really, truly what I think, even more than what we've already stated the obvious, who he really runs to when he's having a troublesome time in his life. It's that he actually didn't want to hear what God had to say. I'm not even going to ask you to raise your hand, but I'm going to go ahead and assume if I did, all of us, if we're honest, would raise our hands, right? If you've been in that position, if you've done something like that. You almost want to go to God, but you know what he's going to tell you, so why bother? Because he's going to tell me something I don't want to hear. I don't want to do that. I don't want to act like that. I don't want to think like that. I don't want to consider those things. And so, what he decides to do is, I want to go somewhere where I can get counsel that I want to hear. And I've often said this to anybody. I say this to myself even. Be careful that we don't become counsel shoppers, right? Like, if you're honest and you have an issue and you need counsel, go to someone spiritual that you look up to and ask them. Hopefully it's a pastor, elder, leader, whatever. But even if it's just your grandmother, your aunt, whoever it is, and they're a spiritual, godly person you can depend on good advice for, don't go to them and get the thing that you already knew you should do, hear it, and then say, yeah, this guy it's like a doctor, though. I need a second opinion. And then a third, and a fourth, and a fifth. And miraculously, all of these people who do not know each other have told you the same exact thing. And then, the seventh time around, you found someone that agrees with you. You're like, well, surely that's the right person to listen to. Is the person that I finally landed on that agrees with what I'm thinking, what I want to do. In fact, one of my metrics in my own spiritual life, for what it's worth to you, is I know God is leading it if I don't want to do it. It's that simple, man. How did you know God was speaking to you? I had a brother a couple weeks ago ask me that for spiritual counsel from another church. I said, man, I'm not going to make something. I'm just going to tell you something real, man. I just do the things that I know I don't want to do because I have a pretty good inclination that's God. I wouldn't do that. Why would I ever pursue that? I don't want to deal with that kind of thing. But it's a pretty good indicator that God's going to tell you something you might not want to hear. And that's, I think, really the core of what's going on here. Go to Beelzebub. He'll tell us what we want to hear. Unfortunately, God is annoying to us, isn't he? A little fly comes in and says, never mind, guys. Just turn around and tell him he's not going to be well because of what he's trying to do here. And this king is just annoyed by the whole thing. So he's not going to let it go. The old saying is, shoot the messenger, right? Well, that's literally what he's going to do. Verse 9, well, if I'm going to be laid up in bed and I'm angry and upset at one person, well, let's grab that guy. So verse 9, the king sent to him a captain of 50 with his 50 men. So he went up to him, and there he was, sitting on the top of a hill. People debate if this is Mount Carmel, by the way, just because of the topography and everything else. It would be an interesting addition if it were, just something to think about. Sitting on top of the hill, and he spoke to him, man of God, the king has said, come down. This is very much from a commander. So Elijah answered and said to the captain of 50, if I am a man of God, then let fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50 men. And fire came down from heaven and consumed him and his 50. And verse 11, he sent to him another captain of 50 with his 50 men. And he answered and said to him, man of God, thus has the king said, come down quickly. Like he's trying to add to the emphasis here. So Elijah answered and said to him, if I'm a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50 men. And fire came down from heaven and consumed him and his 50 men. This is one of those things I could utilize AI for big time, right? That would be awesome to see that in AI. Even if AI glitchy version, I take it. That's awesome. And in verse 13, again, he sent a third captain of 50 with his 50 men. And the third captain of 50 went up and came and fell on his knees before Elijah and pleaded with him. And he said to him, man of God, please let my life and the life of these 50 servants of yours be precious in your sight. Have a heart, man. Look, and fire has come down from heaven and burned up the first two captains of 50s and their 50s, but let my life now be precious in your sight. Now this guy has got a whole different flavor, doesn't he? When you see 100 of your comrades smoked by asteroids out of space, I don't want to bother this guy, quite frankly, and I'm tired of people just dying over this. Now, a couple things to note here. When he says, if I'm a man of God, then let fire come down. He says, if I'm a man of God, you want me to come down, I'll send fire to come down. It's a play on words in Hebrew, particularly, because Ish is man, Isha is woman, but Ish is man, and Aish sounds almost identical in Hebrew. It's one of those in Hebrew, the Hebrew language and the people, the Jewish people, have loved play on words from their inception. So Ish, if you want Ish to come down, I'll send Aish to come down. That's what he's saying. It's a play on words, a little Hebrew fun there for him. And that's a wild thing. But remember, the heart of this is that Ahaziah wants to apprehend him. And he's like, oh, you want to come get me? Well, don't worry. I'll just send some fire down and destroy you. Boom, 50 guys gone, 51 particularly. Boom, 51 again. This third guy, whole different approach, though. And you got to understand that's the whole point. They come with such an arrogance, and what they're saying, man of God, come down here. It's patronizing is what we'd say. Patronizing. Oh, you're a man of the cloth, huh? Come on down. It's like, now the sheriff is in town. Mr. Godly man, you got to run your mouth about the king. Well, we're here to apprehend you. That's what's important to understand. It's like they're blaspheming the prophet of God is what they're doing. They're minimizing. They're saying, hey, real power showed up here, buddy. You better get down here and get with us. We're taking you to the king right now. He says, oh, if I'm a man of God, then I'll send fire down in my place. Does that twice. See, the third guy gets the picture because he is not only a servant of the king, he's a servant of Israel, right? And so he says, hey, look, I'm your servant. And he could say that with an honest heart. I'm your servant. You're the prophet of God to the nation of Israel. I'm your servant. Please do not smoke me with fire. Yeah, I've got to be an ancient descendant of this guy because that's exactly what I think I would have done. Please, man, it is so cool to watch you do that to other people, but now that I have to do it to you, I don't want to do it. You know what I'm saying? He says, oh, okay, fine. It's awesome. Great story. Now, reading on, verse 15. And the angel of the Lord said to Elijah, go down with him. Do not be afraid of him. So he arose and went down to the king. And then he said to him, verse 16, thus says the Lord, because you have sent messengers to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, is it because there's no God in Israel to inquire of his word? Therefore, you shall not come down from the bed which you have gone up, but you shall surely die. So Ahaziah died according to the word of the Lord which Elijah had spoken, because he had no son. Now, Jehoram became king in his place in the second year of Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. Now the rest of the acts of Ahaziah, which he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? Now, awesome. Couple things. Let's just work our way through those passages we just read. In verse 15, it already mentioned this earlier in the chapter. It says it again. Elijah is being informed by none other than the angel of the Lord. So the angel of the Lord. Here's the thing. I'll just cut to the quick for time's sake tonight. This is what we would call a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ. Which, just remember this. Before the Lord Jesus was ever born of Mary, he already existed. So he existed before Mary was born into time and then taken back out of time. If that makes any sense at all, well, that's what it is. That's what we would call in theological circles a Christophany. And wisely it's been said, every Christophany is a theophany, which when you see Christ in the Old Testament, you see the Lord because Christ is the Lord. But nonetheless, this is what theologians would call a Christophany. We're not going to do a detailed study on this, but you could do it and challenge it on your own time. But here's the idea. That there are times and places that this angel of the Lord that is specific and unique and powerful, it's the only angel, messenger is the word, but he's the angel of the Lord in his armies and this kind of thing. It's this specific, unique, powerful angel, and it's only this angel that receives worship from men. That's why one of the many reasons they believe this is a Christophany. So when it says the, there we go again. The angel of the Lord. I guess it's the word tonight. The angel of the Lord. Now, I say all that to say one particular thing. It's actually a really cool point that I'm fascinated by, and you can do with it whatever you want. If you remember in the New Testament, when the Lord Jesus transfigures before Peter, James, and John on the Mount of Transfiguration, which I believe to be Mount Hermon, but that's something else. When he transfigures up there, two figures arrive there. Does anyone remember who they are? Moses and Elijah, right? I've also made the case that I believe in Revelation. We have the two witnesses, that's Moses and Elijah, based on the Mount of Transfiguration. But here is something that is interesting. Take note of the fact that in both Moses' life and Elijah's life, they are two characters in the Bible that both separately and distinctly have this very unique, intimate relationship with this angel of the Lord. Okay? So like Moses had his experiences with the angel of the Lord, so does Elijah. And if that is truly the pre-incarnate Christ, how awesome is it to now think to the New Testament and think about the Lord in physical human body transfiguring before the guys, and who shows up but Moses and Elijah. It's so fitting and appropriate when you think about the totality of the whole thing. That's all I had to say about that. Okay. But notice this too in verse 16. He goes to the king and he says the very thing the messengers had told him to say. Or that he told the messengers to say, he says the same thing once again. And I just note that with you that it's the same message. He doesn't change the message. He doesn't water it down. He says the same message. And it's kind of like it or not. You know, whether you like this or not, this is what needs to be said. And I think that is so refreshing, really, truly. And I believe in that in my own life, and there's something to watering things down and softening things for people, and that's one whole approach and way to do it. But that's not the way Elijah and usually the man of God in the Bible does it. They just tell you the straight truth for what it is, and people are baffled that someone would say it so directly and so seriously and so unashamedly. But he does. He says the same exact message that he said before. No changing, no backpedaling. Now, it says Ahaziah died and Jehoram becomes king, which is his brother. So because they're both sons of Ahab, Ahaziah has no son, so it goes to his other brother Jehoram, which happens to be the king in the north. But meanwhile, the king in the south in Israel, his name is Jehoram. So just so we can be nice and confused here, it's like Jehoram reigned in the second year of Jehoram. That's not helpful at all, but that's the way it was. It was two kings with the same name, and we find those scenarios throughout the kings of Israel, just popular names thousands of years ago. It's really a wild thing. It's really a wild thing. You meet a guy that's about 70 years old, and his wife is either Kathy or Karen. It's amazing. I have so many guys I looked up to, and I look up to still in ministry, and I said, what's your wife's name? Kathy. And I'm like, all the good pastors are married to Kathy. Isn't that weird? What's your wife's name? Karen. I should have guessed. It's either Kathy or Karen. So now I'm going to just start leading with that. Is your wife's name Kathy or Karen? I figured. Anyway, it's like just weird things like that people just name their kids the same thing in a generation. Jehoram was the big one at that time. Chapter 2. It says that it came to pass when the Lord was about to take up Elijah into heaven by a whirlwind, that Elijah went with Elisha from Gilgal. Now here's another thing about Hebrew, and I'm like no Hebrew expert, I've just learned enough and know enough about it, but Elijah and Elisha in English, very similar. It's almost annoying to say, right? But if you were to pronounce, and I'm not even going to do it, with a Maine accent, it's just terrible, but Elijah and Elisha in Hebrew are so distinct and separate, they would not sound at all alike. Elihu and then Elisha. It's like so separate and distinct. It's like so obvious. But anyway, in English, it's kind of frustrating. Elijah, Elisha, Elijah, Elisha. But they go up from Gilgal. Verse 2. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, please, for the Lord has sent me on to Bethel." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. Now in verse 3, the sons of the prophets who were at Bethel came to Elisha and said to him, "Do you not know that the Lord will take your master from over you today?" Which is really like, I think they're thinking they're liberating him. They're like, "Hey, you're going to be the big guy now. Like your boss is going to be gone." You know that, right? And he said, "Yes, I know. Keep silent." He said, "Shut up, man." That's what he says. It's awesome. "Yes, I know that. Shut up." And verse 4. Then Elijah said to him, "Elisha, stay here, please, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho." But he said, "As the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you." So they came to Jericho. Now the sons of the prophets who were at Jericho came to Elisha and said to him, "Do you not know that the Lord's going to take your master from you today?" And he answers, "Yes, I know. Shut up." Same thing, right? Verse 6. Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, please, for the Lord has sent me on to the Jordan." But he said, "As the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. So the two of them went on. It's amazing to read that, and it's so important that we read it for what it is, because Elijah is getting ready to depart. It's a very intimate thing, and he is in his own right preparing to depart and be done with his ministry. I think that's a sobering thing for anyone to have to do that. It's a wild thing, I really think. But he keeps telling Elisha, just stay here, stay here, stay here. Don't go any further. And Elisha says, no way. No matter what happens, I am going to be with you. And friends, it's such a precious relationship. I really want to dig into that in just a moment. But there's something when someone says, I'm there with you forever through thick and... I mean, we even have marriage vows that people don't stick with, right? I mean, let alone friendships, right? And a good pastor friend of mine, Adam Kasperzak, with a thick Maine accent, he says, the only one that said, until death do us part's our wives. And I love that. It's like the only one that promised us, till death do us part's our wives. Yeah, that's true, isn't it? No one else says, goes in front of an altar in front of a group of people and says, I will be with you until the day that I die. But sadly, even marriages, we see that. It's like 50-50 kind of thing. It's like, it's shoddy. It's not good. It's not very promising. But there's something so precious about a guy that says, I will never leave you. If you ever need me, I will be there. I remember the first time this really hit me hard. A pastor, I was so young in the ministry. I'm thinking of this because I'm going to tell you another story in a moment. I was so young in the ministry, a brand new pastor. I'm like 20 years old. And I remember this pastor told me, he's like, I'm a former Marine. I'm squared away, top to bottom, make my bed, bounce a quarter off. And I'm like, whoa. He's like, if you ever need me, brother, I'm there. And I'm like, you sound like Hulk Hogan, but that's cool. If you ever need me for anything. And I remember thinking, man, we were going to hang the sign on the church, and it was going to be up like a lift of ladders, and it was a heavy sign, and I was going to drill holes into concrete, and I really needed someone to hold it. So I called him, I finally called this guy. And it was the first time I called him, the only time I called him. Yeah, I can't do that for you. I was like, you literally told me like 10 different reasons why you would never tell me that what you're telling me right now. So I thought, well, I guess I can't really depend on that guy. No matter what, you call me anytime. I'm a drill sergeant. I'm a this. I'm that. Okay, well, Rambo, I needed you and you didn't come. So, you know what I mean? Like people do that all the time, don't they? I'm there for you no matter what. I'm there for you, man. So what am I saying? Well, I think this is one of the reasons why Elijah's doing this. First of all, first main reason, all of them are valid. I think the primary reason for Elijah wanting Elisha to stay is that he is a reserved and private man. Everything that we read about Elijah, he's a very reserved and private man. He's not into the limelight. He's not into a lot of talking and partying and being with other people. So different than Elisha. We'll see this as we wind down in a few. But I believe Elijah himself is just that kind of guy. Doesn't necessarily need anybody around at any particular time. We'd call him an introvert in today's terminology. I think another reason, because he's an introvert, is he's kind of annoyed. Reason number 2. Kind of annoyed that as he's thinking about his last moments on earth and departure and handing ministry over and it being different from then on out, it's just a part of him that wants to just go and be alone. Again, part of his personality traits, I believe. But I think a third reason, maybe not as strong, but definitely a strong reason, is he's testing his mettle, as we would say. Testing him. And this is the story that came to my mind when I thought about that earlier. Again, being a young pastor, planting a church, and I was pouring my heart out to this senior pastor, this older man, many decades in ministry. And he just looked tired, you know what I mean? He looked like he had seen stuff. You guys ever seen The Night of the Museum, by the way? That scene where he's got him in a chokehold and he says, I've seen some things. He's like what? And he's like, I'm not going to tell you. Like that kind of thing. Like, what have you seen? And I'm pouring my heart out. Oh, it's so hard. I can't believe this. And whatever I'm saying, and I'm doing all this kind of thing. And he just, and it's cool because of the mannerism that came with it and the look and the nonchalant attitude. And he just said, and the way he said it, I can never replicate it. It's the forging of iron. It's like I'm wanting him to counsel me and help me and guide me and tell me what to do and how do you do that? What do you do with these people? And they pulled the rug out from, and he just said, it's the forging of iron. I was like, that is so cool. That is awesome. It's the forging of iron. I'm like, yeah, that really doesn't help me at all. But I will figure out what this means. And sure enough, you know what? That helped me a lot. I don't do that anymore. I don't whine and cry to other pastors. I don't. You'll never find me doing it. You'll never hear me doing it. You'll never hear me telling them a story about doing it. Hey, Pastor Greg, how you doing? Oh, I'm awesome. Having a good time, man, like a rodeo clown, just enjoying my life in ministry. That's what I tell them. They think it's too good to be true. I had the answer I got all those years ago. It's the forging of iron. It's the forging of iron. So I think there's a part of the forging of iron here with Elisha to prove, are you really the guy that's always going to be around? Stay here, man. No way. Oh, no. I'm coming with. Hey, this is a great spot. Wouldn't it be nice to stay here? No, because I'm always with you. Remember? Oh, that's right. Well, look, here we are. Here we are in Jericho. And I'm going over the Jordan. It would be nice if you just stayed here in Jericho and I went on. He says, no, I am going with you. I'm always going to be with you. You get the idea? And he's like, oh, man. I'm sure there's a part of it like, oh, come on, man, just leave me alone. And we see that. We'll see that in a moment. He'll be like, just what do you want? Like, leave me alone, kid. But here's a real testament to Elisha. And there's a few things we want to pick up on here before we wind down. Is Elisha knows his calling. He knows what he's called to do. And right now, in his life, he is called to be an assistant to Elijah. He doesn't even want to think about any other implication. Clearly, hey, didn't you hear that your master's going to be taken up today? He's like, shut up. I don't care about that. He's not like, it could be my chance. I could be big time. He's like, guys, I don't want to hear that. Stop it. Cut it out, man. Because he knows he's called to assist Elijah. And that's all he knows. Remember, that's how it started, right? He came to him and threw his mantle on him and he said, like annoyed. And he's like, can I just say goodbye to my parents? He's like, do whatever you want, kid. I'm out of here. And he like runs like, Mom, Dad, I got to go. And he like leaves and he follows Elijah. And that never changed for him. He never changed. That was his mission. Boom. And so now as we're winding down, do you think Elisha's going to be like, well, yeah, it's been a long run. Good enough. He's like, no way, man. I'm with you to the end. So that set up very, very nicely. Verse 7. Now 50 men of the sons of the prophet went and stood facing them at a distance, while the two of them stood by the Jordan. And if you've ever been to Jericho and you know the proximity to Jordan, you can see it. That's one of the cool things about the story of Jericho falling by the nation of Israel, crossing over the Jordan River. The people that lived in Jericho watched the water part, and they watched the people walk through, and they're like, oh, we're in trouble. If they got people that can part water like that, I don't think we stand a good chance against these people. So these guys are going out of Jericho, and they're watching them, 50 of them. And Elijah took his mantle and rolled it up and struck the water, and it was divided this way and that, so that the two of them crossed over on dry ground. And so it was when they had crossed over that Elijah said to Elisha, ask, what may I do for you before I am taken away from you? And Elisha said, please, let a double portion of your spirit be upon me. So he said, and I believe wisely, you have asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if you see me when I am taken from you, it shall be so for you. But if not, it shall not be so. You know what he says, and it's an honest, awesome thing to say? I have no idea if that's something I can give to you or not. That's between you and God, man. That's someone who says, as far as I'm concerned, this is what God's called me to. You're doing what you think God's called you to. And when I'm gone, that's between you and God. I don't know how that's going to work. But if you're around, I have a sneaky suspicion you're probably the guy. And so he encourages him in that. Now, people have noted he asked for a double portion of his spirit to be upon him. It's noted that Elijah does 8 miracles and Elisha does 16 miracles. He literally does twice the amount of miracles in the Bible than Elijah did. So people point to that. That's pretty cool, really interesting to say the least. Coincidence, maybe. But even more importantly, it's actually a touching thing from Elisha. I think more touching than just, I want to be twice as good as you. That's not what he's saying. See, the right of the firstborn was that the firstborn of the father would receive the double portion of inheritance. And where have they just gone through? Multiple schools of the prophets, hundreds of men that follow after and want to emulate Elijah. And he says, only one of them is your true son, your firstborn son, and that's me. I just want to be your firstborn son. I want to carry on your legacy is what I want to do. That's what's in my heart to do, is just carry on your legacy, man. It's beautiful. It's touching. It reminds me of something Leonard Ravenhill, a fiery prophet, preacher, pastor man from a generation ago. Leonard Ravenhill, when he was dying, his son came to him, and he said to his son, you know, all these young men in ministry, he said, they want my mantle, but they don't want my sackcloth. They don't want my tears. They don't want my pain. They want the mantle, but they don't want what comes with it. And that's why I think Elijah even says here, if you're around, good chance it might be yours, but that's nothing to do with me. That's between you and God, man. Well, then in verse 11, it happened as they continued on and talked that suddenly a chariot of fire appeared with horses of fire and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. Now, let's be specific. Let's be Bible students. Let's make sure we're reading the text and not inferring anything that other people have caused us to believe. Oh, that's easy to do, isn't it? Now, one of the most common things you'll hear is that Elijah was taken up to heaven in a chariot of fire. It says that the chariot of fire split the two of them and it just blew right through them and split the two of them apart. And then it tells us that a whirlwind sucked Elijah up into heaven. So it wasn't the chariot of fire that took Elijah into heaven. It was the thing that split the two apart. And then some sort of backdraft wind came through and sucked Elijah up and threw him. Now, specifically, the translation of the word heaven is important because it would be like our atmosphere. So Elisha gets knocked down. And he looks and he sees whoosh, and like a mini tornado just throws Elijah into the sky, into the like beyond the clouds. Well, he's gone. That's what he's going to conclude. Like, he gone, right? Like, he truly gone, never to come back. That is insane what just happened. What an awesome way to go. Isn't it interesting that Moses and Elijah have the coolest ways of going? Like, God just takes up Moses and does some little thing with him, and I personally believe he granted his request to see his glory. Because remember when he was alive, he's like, Moses, I can't show you my glory or you'd be dead. So I truly believe he brought Moses up to the mountain there, Mount Nebo, and he says, boom, check it out, and disintegrates him. That's my personal thing. Here's another way to go, getting thrown by a mini tornado into the atmosphere, right? Now again, remember, I know this is really bizarre, it's my pastor's doing, by the way. Remember though, people say that Elijah never died, and this is their proof text. This is their proof text. They're like, well, see, he never died. I don't know about that. I'm not reading that and thinking, yeah, he definitely didn't die. I'm thinking, that's a really cool way to kill a guy. I mean, actually, the coolest way that God could kill a guy, as far as I'm concerned, really, it's at the top of the list. My point is that people will say the two witnesses in the book of Revelation are Enoch and Elijah because they're the only two men in the Bible that haven't died yet. Enoch walked with God and was not, and then they claim this passage here is proof that Elijah never died. For what it's worth, and I'm not going to banter and argue with anybody about this, but just simply say, I don't think this is a proof text to say that Elijah never died. If you read on, and we will, they go searching for him, and Elisha says, you're never going to find him. No, he's gone. He's dead and gone kind of thing. He ain't coming back. And that was the great debate. And again, it has everything to do with the translation of the word heaven and understanding that there were 3 heavens in those days and all that. That's a whole other thing. So again, separated by the two, the horse and the fire, and then the whirlwind comes and throws Elijah into heaven. So Elisha, in verse 12, saw it, and he cried out, my father, the chariot of Israel and its horsemen. So he saw him no more. And he took hold of his own clothes and tore them into 2 pieces. and also took up the mantle that had fallen from him, Elijah, and went back and he stood by the bank of the Jordan. He took the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him, struck the water, and said, "Where is the Lord God of Elijah?" And when he also struck the water, it divided this way and that, and Elisha crossed over. Now, there's actually a lot here. It's so awesome. It's touching. It's so touching to me. And again, we're going to see as we wind down in just a moment, at the end, how Elisha is so distinctly different than Elijah. It's really, really interesting. But I personally am so touched that Elisha's first response is not like, "Oh, I'm going to be the big dog now." You know what I mean? That's sort of the obvious implication, that the moment that Elijah is gone, Elisha's the man. You know what I mean? I don't know where you're at, but I mean, we can do it on a corporate level. You know that, right? "Oh, if I were only the manager, if I were the vice president, this whole thing would be turned around in a heartbeat." Do you know what I'm talking about? So just so we don't have to keep it in a ministry context, we do this all the time. We act like if we were in charge, man, we really know some stuff. We really got it figured out. Well, maybe we do, maybe we don't. But I hope to make a case here in just a moment of the fact that there's something so much more important than us being the big dog, us being the person everyone listens to and obeys or whatever it is. Personal story, being in the Calvary Chapel and all, the Calvary Chapel family that we're part of, it's a big, awesome, beautiful family. The biggest, the best that's ever been. There's no better family than, you know what I mean? So big, beautiful family. It really is awesome. But I remember being, again, early 20s, being a Calvary pastor, and I was thinking, man, got a couple years under my belt, like, I could really be used in the Calvary Chapel movement, man. Like, it's pretty cool. And like, I would see the old guys teaching the conferences, and I'd be like, "Oh, their ticket's almost up. You know, a couple of us young guys, we need to start getting in here and telling people what's going on, start informing people." That was my early 20s. I'm now 36, about to be 37. And now, I'm seeing the old guys get up there, and I'm like, "Keep going. Don't give up." I was able to finish a conversation that I had with Pastor Joe Foch years ago. Years ago, I saw him and I was talking about handing the church over and retirement and passing the mantle or whatever it was. So it's like relevant to this whole thing. And this was years ago. I don't even 15 years ago or something. And he just kind of smiled and he said, "You know, I got a lot of tread on the tire." And I was like, "Yeah, man." So I just saw him the other day and I said, "Hey, you remember?" I was like, you don't remember that conversation, but here, I'm telling you right now, I've watched your life. You got those all-terrain tires, baby. You got a lot of meat on there still. Just keep on rocking, Pastor Joe, you know. But I'm just saying that even I can just relate in my own heart how sinful, how wrong. Get the old guys out of the way. These guys know so much. They have so much to offer. We don't need to hear from some 30, 40-year-old guy necessarily. Man alive. My father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. He's not like, "Yes, it's my time, and it's now or never." Anyway, it just popped in my head. It's my time, man. No. But it goes back to what Aristotle said a long time ago. He said, "He who has never learned to obey cannot be a good commander." He who has not or never learned to obey cannot be a good commander. And this is so relevant for us. Think about Elisha. Think another one. Moses and Joshua. You remember who takes over from Moses, right? Joshua. But do you know what Joshua was until he took over the nation of Israel and millions of people? Do you know what he was until the moment he took over? He was Moses' butler. And I just put that in English so we can understand. It says he was his assistant. He was Moses' butler, man. He was the butler. And it's like the butler's going to take over. And everyone's like, "What? Who's taking over for Elijah?" His butler. His assistant. The guy that takes out the trash. You're like, why that guy? That guy is like, so what? He follows him around. That don't make him no big shot. That don't make him the qualified guy. No, it does. It really does, friends. Look, check it out. This is so relevant to you and I this morning. Because again, to get to the top position, the thing that everyone wants, here it is. This is the grand secret that no one wants to do. We all want the top position. We just don't want to actually serve people. We want people to serve us. But someone like Joshua, someone like Elisha, they don't care about it. They care about serving their guy or serving the people. And here's the cool thing. If you serve people long enough, guess what? You'll serve people is what will happen. And that's what we're reading about. He has this distinct title on his life of he's going to be carrying the mantle for Elijah. But you know what? It's no different than anything he's ever done before. He's just faithfully following in the footsteps. He's faithfully caring for people. And so often people say, I got to be that guy, I got to be that girl, I got to be that person. I'm going to be a famous YouTuber. Okay. Maybe try serving people first. That might get you a lot further ahead. Now, I note with you that it says that he took up the mantle in verse 13. He took up the mantle. So remember he said if it happens and you're there, you're most likely the guy. The mantle falls in front of him. And up until that moment, it's theory. Now, the mantle is sitting in front of him. He could have walked away. He could have said, you know what though? Wow, that's a lot of pressure, man. That's a lot of work. I don't know about all that. But it does tell us very specifically that he took up the mantle. It was his choice. God didn't make him do this. God granted it to him, and he received it. And that's how it should always be with us. God grants it to us, and we receive it. We take it from him. And when he strikes the water, just like he just saw, and it just happened for him with Elijah, he says, "Where is the Lord God of Elijah?" I could not say this any better than Charles Spurgeon did. Listen to this. When he strikes the water and says, "Where is the Lord God of Elijah?" Charles Spurgeon said, "And when you have got their mantle, do not waste precious time in lamentations about them anymore. Get to your business. There is a river in your way. What then? Well, go to the Jordan as the prophet Elijah did and try to pass it. Say not, 'Where is Elijah?' but 'Where is the Lord God of Elijah?' Elijah is gone, but his God is not. Elijah has gone away, but Jehovah is present still." That's really humbling for me. That's really impressive to me. That Elijah is gone and he goes right to business. Not a big wheat fest and mourning and all. He just, all right, it's time to get to work. Got things to do. So they move on. Let's read on here in verse 15. In this old school Calvary Chapel Bible study. Verse 15. When the sons of the prophets who were from Jericho saw him, they said, "The spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha." See, other people saw it. God did a work in them. You know, Elisha didn't need to make it known to people. God made it known to them. And I've always said God is quite able, perfectly able to raise up a man or a woman. He doesn't need anyone's help. And the people said, "The spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha." And they came to meet him and bowed to the ground before him. And then in verse 16, they said to him, "Look now, there are 50 strong men with your servants. Please let them go and search for your master, lest perhaps the Spirit of the Lord has taken him up and cast him upon some mountain or into some valley." See, they even understood. And remember, they were watching. You remember that, right? They were watching, and their takeaway was perhaps he just got ejected and landed in some weird swamp or something, right? So they're thinking, wow, he just got tossed somewhere pretty far away. We're going to go find him. And he said, "Don't send anybody." But when they urged him until he was ashamed, he said, "Send him." Therefore they sent 50 men, and they searched for 3 days, but they didn't find him. And when they came back to him, for he had stayed in Jericho, he said, "Didn't I tell you not to go?" That's awesome, isn't it? I told you guys not to go, wasting your time looking for a guy that's thrown in the atmosphere. You ain't going to find him anytime soon. I think we all knew he was going to go, and he went. Now, here's the thing. It's verse 19, so we can keep moving on. The men of the city said to Elisha, please notice the situation of the city, this is in Jericho, is pleasant. The situation of the city is pleasant, as my Lord sees, but the water is bad and the ground barren. And he said, bring me a new bowl and put salt in it. So they brought it to him. Then he went out to the source of the water, cast the salt therein, and said, thus says the Lord, I have healed the water. And from it there shall be no more death or barrenness. So the water remains healed to this day, according to the word of Elisha, which he spoke. So, I mean, this is one of many miracles from Elisha, but here's the thing. It's so immediate and so quick after Elijah is gone. What God is doing immediately is establishing and validating Elisha. I mean, obviously, right? And again, God has his own way of doing that. God doesn't need anyone's help to do that. I am so convinced of that. I'm so convinced of that. God does not need anyone's help to do that. And the people go to him and say, help us, the water's bad. And he says, bring me a new bowl with salt, throws the salt in the water, you're all set. And they instantly know, man, God's hand is on his life. God's doing something in him. And as they said earlier, the spirit of Elijah rests on him. They knew that. Now, not everybody is so favorable. That's what we need to finish the chapter with as we read on. In verse 23, then he went up from there to Bethel. And as he was going up the road, some youth came from the city and mocked him. And they said, go up, you bald-headed. Go up, you bald head. And so he turned around and looked at them and said, I am 10 times more handsome than you guys. No, he didn't say it. Verse 24, he turned around and he looked at them and pronounced a curse on them in the name of the Lord. And 2 female bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the youths. Then he went from there to Mount Carmel, and from there returned to Samaria. It's like, lesson from there, do not make fun of bald guys, right? Do not do that to yourself. No, I could say you might end up bald yourself, but even worse than that, mauled by a bear, man. That's crazy. But before we wind down and just close out, let me just, serious takeaway though from what we just read. Remember that Bethel is a pagan center of worship where they're worshiping a calf in Bethel. Very pagan atmosphere. And they're not just making fun of him, but when they're saying, go up, bald head, go up, they're specifically talking about Elijah. Because they remember Elijah, remember we started the book of the hairy man. Hairy man versus the bald man. And they're telling him to go up, go up. Why didn't you go up with Elijah after all? That they're mocking him in that way. And so he says, all right, we'll curse you guys. And then 2 bears come take care of him. It's a wild, wild story. The only thing I wanted to point that out and say was this, is that Elijah is so distinct and different than Elisha, and that's okay. He still comes in his spirit. He still works in that way. But at the end of the day, Elisha is so distinct and different. For one, Elijah, hairy as all get out. That's a distinguishing factor. Elisha, he's a bald guy. It's kind of weird as far as like his age and everything. It's like an awkward opposite thing. But you also look at it and you notice that these young men are rallied around him, and you always see Elisha with people. Elijah was not that way. Elijah was always reserved, and he would go into a situation and leave quickly. Elisha, you notice it was just telling us he was just there in Jericho hanging around. Elisha is totally different than Elijah. And he doesn't try to be Elijah. He just is who he is. And that's a very cool thing, very interesting thing to notice about Elijah.